Hello, welcome everyone back to another episode of Energy Unleashed. My name is Suzanne Worthley with my partner Kim Hess. Well,
Today I am. I am Kim
today and
today.
always, right? My sidekick.
I am in my body, I'm pretty sure. So,
I am in attendance today. Okay, well, yeah, Kim and I are sitting here. Let's see, what day is this? We're gonna say what day this is when we're recording. We're recording on the 18th
mhm.
of June. And this has nothing to do with what we're going to dovetail into and unleash, but we are both sitting here saying that the energies have been a little ominous and strange. We are in the midst in Minnesota of a lot of thunderstorms this week, a lot of rain, which is needed. I mean, I'm not complaining. I think, and me personally, I love thunderstorms, especially in the night. I'm one of those ones that's, got all the windows open or I'm standing in the porch or in the yard. So I know that we need them and I know that, but there is an ominousness, is that a word? Ominousness to it. There's a bit of there's a bit of foreboding around the feelings of the weird I think it's just basically the high humidity level to tell you the truth, but it just feels weird.
And it's heavy. I mean, the
Yeah.
humidity is really high and it's warmed. Like it was chilly yesterday, and now we're like sweating bullets just walking outside.
Yeah.
It's warm.
And it's just got that weird kind of funk feeling to it. And I was out with another friend this morning for some breakfast and another peer in the industry, and we were talking about how this whole year is a little strange right now in that, for being in a so-called political year, here we are coming to the end or at least midpoint, if not rounding into the end of June. And
Mhm.
it doesn't feel like it's a political year at all. Thank God, because I think it's an insane one anyway. But we were laughing about what if it just like kept going like this and nothing happened? Like,
That
what
would
if
be
just
weird.
what if just nothing moves forward and it's December, right? I mean,
I don't know.
it's a weird feeling. It's a weird energy, and people are completely lethargic and
Yeah.
they are tired. And I don't think it's the same as hot tired for Minnesota heat or wherever heat. I don't think it's humidity hot tired. I think it's energetic tired. And I think people are just tired, metaphorically speaking, of a lot of things. And so it's just a weird time right now.
They were talking about, I just read something a little bit ago that when we had all of the Aurora Borealis stuff, the Northern Lights, it was around May 10th, when everybody can see them from everywhere, like
Mhm,
every country, it was just crazy that the electric energy for a period of time was escalated significantly.
mhm.
So it's interesting, like how would that affect our bodies when we are standing here on Earth?
I
The
think it's
electricity
like
goes up.
having our finger in the socket, and you're standing in the puddle, and it's like gig, 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 gig. Well, when that goes away, our meat and bone situation still has to integrate.
Yeah.
And if we're not integrating it into a grounding mechanism and really, really doing serious grounding, I think we're exhausted and we're calibrating differently. And I know a lot of things physical physiology wise are recalibrating. I can feel it. My eyes are doing funny things. We've been talking in our group about eyes like crazy. Yeah, and it's just lots and lots of strange symptoms are coming back. Ascension is just kicking everybody's butt again, and that's going to happen all the way through.
Yeah.
So we should just get used to it. But I think that it's just a combination of what's happening astrologically, sun-wise, ascension-wise. It's just a lot.
Well, up at the lake, what was that, a week and a half ago or so? I took a picture of the sunset and
Yeah,
you could see a green line going out of the sun.
that was
And then
crazy.
when you zoom in on it, it was almost like a DNA ladder kind of looking, like
Yep.
it was matrix looking. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what is that? Like,
It's
so
like
I
a
don't
portal.
know.
It's like a portal with a staircase going through it, right?
It was really interesting. Yeah. Plus there was like a comet or something in the upper, which we couldn't see with our naked eye, but with the camera. It
Yeah, a
looked
little
like
shot in the corner.
yeah,
Very
or a
cool.
shooting star or something. I don't know what it was, but
Yeah, I think we're just in for a bit of I mean, I feel like we say the same thing for the last 4 years. We're on a roller coaster.
Mhm.
I don't think I see any of us getting off the ride real soon.
Mhm.
So just kind of letting people know that this is something that we're all feeling. If that resonates for you, great. If it doesn't, toss it out. Hey, if you're, you know,
Mhm.
barreling along through life feeling great and not having anything affect you, more power to you. You can
Yeah.
maybe maybe jump in the comments and tell us your secret because that'd be nice.
Right, right. Is there an herb I can take? I mean, is there something that's
Is there an
a quick
herb?
fix? Come on.
Well, yeah, actually. Okay, so these Energy Unleashed podcasts are really about my sessions that I do with my clients. They allow me to talk generically speaking about them, and I thought this was interesting because Kim, I had two within the same week that were so incredibly similar and having the same issue that I thought that we could maybe kind of unleash this idea, and it is that of almost like an identity struggle. So here's the concept, and I'm just going to talk one because they're very similar. The person struggles with the element of power in terms of a persona that they carry at work, both professional women, by the way, and the persona who they are outside of work, whether that's family, friends, children, siblings, whatever. And that is distinctly two different personas. Now, we did one once a couple weeks back about owning your story. This isn't your story. It isn't the same kind of concept that we talked about there as much as it's literally feeling. And both of these women literally felt fully empowered at work and not as empowered at home. Fully empowered to speak their truth, hold up for themselves, say things in terms of, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to jump in and point this out or whatever, and have this hesitancy when outside of that identity
Mm.
parameter, not the same voice and power, not the same even feeling and power. And I thought that that was so incredibly interesting that they both were doing that. And sometimes I I think I would have assumed a lot of people feel more powerful at home with their friends and their family where it's their safe space and less empowered at work, but it was the opposite.
Yeah, I feel like when I was working in corporate, I was pretty much the same at both because I was in that doer mode. I was, organized, had lists and all I was, so I felt like I probably had similar power at both places. So it's interesting to walk out the door from work and then you get home and you're handling things or guarding things that you normally wouldn't do. Like, how does that work?
Well, and I think it has a lot to do with the relationships in terms of who they are relating to, even if it's just themselves. And does this stem from a belief system from their childhood? Does this stem from past experiences where they have some, like trauma experiences that are triggering? A lot of the conversation with both of these women was the limitations that they felt when they weren't able to pull up the power quite the same. And I thought that that was super interesting because the limitations that they were feeling were things like guilt. I feel guilty. I can see that when you're with a partner or kids or whatever. I feel vulnerable. And to me, I would think that they're feeling vulnerable at work, but
Right.
they're feeling vulnerable in the home. So to me, that kind of indicates that there is a pattern of what I grew up with, what the parenting was like, what the parenting style was like, etc. And then of course the all knowing fail, and that is kind of, I think, on everybody's list for whether it's home and or personal and or work and or anything, because the fail subject is always seems to come up, that people just don't know how to deal with fail. And I think that's so interesting because I don't really care that much. I always thought it was a silly thing anyway, because it's just like, well, what is fail really?
Right.
I mean, I was bad at younger years, but I mean, the older I get, I'm like, that isn't even a thing.
Well, because if you don't fail, you don't learn,
Yeah, you don't grow.
you
Yeah.
can't, yeah, just know
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm really curious that did they, in your sessions, did it come out that they just didn't feel like they had control? Was the ego control part of this? Um,
I think a lot, especially one that I'm thinking of here, is really like when they're in these interpersonal relationships, they feel there's a lot of empathing going on, by the way. There's a lot of
mm,
energy stealing, there's a lot of energy robbing. Most everybody I work with seems to be an empath because I think almost everybody on this planet is to some extent, but there's a lot of energy stealing. And when it is done in the workforce, it's almost funny because the energy stealing oftentimes for people will be, I'm the controller mechanism at work, so I'm stealing the energy this way. But when I come home or have a personal relationship, I flip that coin and I'm actually being the victim. So
Uh,
victim and controller is the same exact program, remember, but we definitely have two sides of that coin. And I think it's so interesting that a lot of these people that, not just these two women, but a lot of people that struggle with this stuff, is they flip that coin. I can be controller all day long at work, and it's almost like it's my fake persona. I can work out stuff there, and I can hide behind my accreditations. And what was coming
mm.
out in some of these is why I can feel powerful at work is because the boundaries are clearly made for me, not necessarily from me, but for me.
Oh, so when you go home, if you're not creating your own boundaries and your own expectations or
Yep.
desires, like
Yep.
then you're just all over the place.
Yep, you're willy-nilly and you're wishy-washy, and now I'm all of a sudden getting taken advantage of, and now I'm resentful, and I can slip into that victim mode really, really easily. Also, when someone has accreditation,
Yeah.
accreditation gives me this false sense of identity already. And it gives me a false sense of power. But what it also does is it gives me a false, again, boundary or parameter that I can work within, that I can blame it on the system. So even if I get attacked within, an interaction with a client per se, I can always fall back on, well, that's the way the system goes. And I mean, we get that crap all day long, especially dealing with some medical stuff recently with my parents. I'm sorry, that's the system. I'm sorry, that's the way it goes. This is the rules, and you're just like, oh, for God's sakes, this is insane and stupid. And you should really maybe look at your system failure here. Nope, nope, that's the system. So I think when we're in those, we can
Yeah.
feel more powerful because I can shove the system down your throat. Whereas I have none of that going on in a personal relationship when I walk away from that system.
Yeah, when you're in the work, I just so many scenarios came through my head, but yeah, you're obviously while you have power, you're doing things. You don't have to take it personally because it is the system or the
Yes.
process or whatever it is. Yeah, it totally makes sense to me that that is what they lean on.
Yeah. And especially because these are people that are professionals that help others.
Mhm.
And I'm using that help and I'm putting that into the framework of my so-called education and system boundaries. I lose all that oftentimes when I go onto the other side of the coin because now, oh crap, I'm vulnerable. This is just me. This is the naked, raw me. I don't have any of that. So I can get my butt kicked with emotions and I don't know where to go with that. And so oftentimes they will play up that martyrdom because it's like, this is my almost release over here to get energy in a different way. It's really kind of amazing how we can flip and flop, we humans. Doesn't that just kind of nutty?
It is. It's kind of like having, I don't want to say schizophrenia, but like two different personalities of and try to keep up with that. Like
Yeah.
managing two different kinds of personas of this is how I am here and now wait, okay, I just walked in the door and now I'm like this.
Yeah.
That seems really difficult to me.
Well, actually, this is why they were struggling because one of them actually used the word compartmentalized.
Oh.
And if we do compartmentalization, which is a really long word, compartmentalization, if we're doing that, then we aren't necessarily wearing our truth on our sleeve either. We're sticking things away until we can deal with them later. Or I'm not going to do that because now I'm home, Suzanne, or I am going to do that because now I'm professional, Suzanne. And that gets really tricky because when we're in compartmentalization, we're having to remember which compartment we put them in,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
It just
that's a
seems
little
like a
tough.
lot of work. It's kind of like lying. Lying is hard. How do you keep up with the lies?
I don't
Like,
necessarily think it's lying. I think it's just switching gears.
oh, I'm
And
not saying that's what they're doing. I think like just if I were to lie about things personally,
oh, how do you keep up with
how do you
it?
keep up with it? Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know. It's like, wait, did I? Yeah, I
Yeah.
could never
Yeah,
reconcile
I
that.
see what you're drawing
Yeah.
there. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting sideline for that. But yeah, it's a strange concept for us to think about identity crisis or identity struggles because we don't necessarily all think that we're different at work.
Right.
And let's even take this a little farther and unleash it to the extent of people also in personal relationships can really chameleonize their self because of that person also. So we can even take it a step further. I can be somebody at work, I can be somebody when I'm my so-called me, but I could also be dating somebody that I will chameleon myself to fit into his or her world because I feel like I'm not going to be accepted 100% and I'm vulnerable in who I am. So I make myself change into my presentation of who I am to fit in. And
Oh
that
my
one's
goodness. Yeah,
really,
I could see that in different relationships. Like if you're yeah, I have a friend that is different with different people.
yep.
If you're one-on-one, it's one thing. If you're in a group of people, it's a little different.
It
And
isn't that uncommon. I see it often. And I think it's really important for us to go, okay, why do I feel like I have to change? Where is my self-worth in there? Where do I stop and start with that line? Because I can own myself all the way through, you know? So back to these two, it was really interesting, especially with the one, it's like, if you're that powerful at work, what is so scary about being that powerful with relationships? Right? I mean,
yeah,
what is that in there? It's what is that kind of belief system that's limiting so much? And I think this has a lot to do with growing up, as does everything, sadly. I think this has a lot to do with how did I be seen and heard? How was I accepted? How wasn't I accepted? How was I parented? How was I embraced? And this is tough stuff, you know?
it really is because it's embedded,
Mhm.
your how you grew up and the family structure that you had. If you were not able to speak up and you had a lot of, like you said, guilt and shame and disappointments, all those things, those words are so tough, and
Mhm.
that is so embedded in your belief systems and your energy fields.
And not that I'm saying these are these two particular clients, but oftentimes also they will end up with a narcissist because that will just start to really be able to, now you can beat the crap out of me and take all my energy when I'm in that personal relationship because now I'm just exhausted and they're prime suspects for narcissism. And I think that that's something to really watch too. They're also prime suspects for me being not committed in relationships, just flitting from one to the other, just using and abusing. And then that's that full circle of, oh God, now I'm actually self-abusive to my self-worth, meaning I'm just going to let anybody and everybody, kind of into my world and take what they want. And now I feel like garbage. And it just perpetuates, see, I am garbage because I feel like garbage. They treat me like garbage. I mean, it's that self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts,
They
that
keep in
never-ending
the same
circle.
type of relationship over and over and over, and they can't figure out
Mhm.
why.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
And
Okay.
again, these are the people that don't necessarily, and I'm not saying these are the clients, but people that do this are not the people that are doing their own work enough to raise their frequency in between relationships. Because if I'm not raising my frequency in between relationships, I'm just going to call on the same exact vibration. So this is why people go, I just seem to date the same person. It's like, yeah, because you keep sending out the same signal.
Yeah,
Wait.
exactly. So how did you leave it with these clients and to like what advice did you give them or what was their takeaway in this? Because
Well, with the one I remember, it was so funny because she didn't even know she was doing it, first of all. She didn't
oh,
even have an idea that and I called it out in the actual session because of this. When she's talking about her personal life, this was her body language. And when she talked about her work, this was her body language. And I said, do you really even know that you hold two different frequencies when you are a working professional and just yourself out, dating or doing whatever? And she's like, what? And I said, you actually don't trust your you self as much as your work self. And that's so it was a surprise
mhm.
even to her. And it was funny because it revealed itself, especially by body language. So when we looked at the silliness of how can you possibly change by walking out the door from an office and into the home of your own, the door of your own home, how does your personality change? I mean, how could that possibly change without you being in charge of that? So I think my goal as an energy practitioner, especially in the session part when we're chatting, is to re-empower them to realize you're the one that's doing this, you're the one that can undo this. The
Mhm.
silliness of saying there's no possible way just because I changed my clothes. Let's use a cop. A cop that changes his uniform is still a cop. You
Yep.
know, a doctor who takes off his scrubs is still a doctor. My sister who's a surge tech is constantly still a surge tech. It's just you don't, well, and an energy worker is constantly an energy worker. You don't necessarily take off a so-called energetic uniform, or because I don't have letters behind my name or credentials or an acronym or all of those things. It's just silly. And when we really look at the silliness of it is when we can start to own the fact that I'm the one that's doing this. And then you dive further into unleashing, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And what's the belief system and the limitation when I'm at home?
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great, I mean, it obviously that works for so many things,
Yeah.
whatever issues you might be having, but um for it to be a realization, that's going to be interesting to see, like going home from your office even
Yeah.
and going into her home. It's like, oh my gosh, I am doing that. I didn't
And
even like,
and I am the same exact person walking in the door. That's
yeah,
crazy, I mean, it's funny. And I think we can take this and really apply it even farther and farther and farther. I mean, maybe it's not work and home. Maybe it's, personal relationships and it's family.
mhm,
I mean, this kind of a change in nature can happen for a lot of people. Family is one of those. Gosh, I slipped back into the trigger of me being the baby in the family. So I just all of a sudden don't even get up and help because I'm the baby. That kind of crap can slip into uh, real life, if we want to say that word, and any time, because again, these are identity situations. These are identity roles that we're playing. So it doesn't just mean work and home. It can be almost anything, if that makes some
anything. I
sense.
think all
Yeah.
relationships, it's so in, and that would be just difficult when you're changing who you are, your persona through every type of relationship you have. That's to it'd be exhausting.
It is exhausting.
I mean, the energy fields are so depleted with that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to look at why we're doing it and look at the belief system and watch the tracking and look for the patterns. What I have a tendency to do with my clients is say, look at the patterns in your life. If the patterns keep reemerging, that means you're playing with the same belief system.
Mm.
I mean, it's pretty simple to see the patterns are very similar. And I do this again and again in a different way. Obviously, I'm wearing a different role, but I'm doing the same thing. And so the pattern is pretty much the indicator of where the belief system stems from.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean it's easy to change, similar to
Ugh,
habits, right?
it's just, yeah.
It takes a lot of work and focus to acknowledge it, realize when you're doing it, and then, make that change.
Well, and I think the cool part about energy and spiritual work is that half of the battle is the identification of it.
Mhm.
And I think with this one particular client, like I said, it organically showed itself in her session, in her body language. That isn't what she was coming to talk about at all. And she was talking about the trouble, with relationships or whatever, but it really opened the umbrella that she was standing under of split identities.
Right.
So, and power and no power. It's so cool.
It is
Once,
so
once you
interesting.
know, you can watch for it, right? I mean, knowledge
Yeah.
is power.
Yeah, I think it takes it to another level, what you're talking about now, where before when we've talked about your behaviors, it's like singly, this is just who you are. You do this across the board. To look at it for behaviors, but you're different versus where you're using it.
Mhm.
That's really, really interesting. And I'm curious to see how much of that goes back to their childhood, and how they were brought up or
And have they been empathing all along throughout their childhood because that's their safety mechanism of getting fuel?
right.
Empaths have it hard
Mhm.
because there isn't a lot of training on empaths. And when we're tiny, even when we were kids, that wasn't a word. That wasn't even a word 10 years ago. So the concept of me not being seen and heard, so me doing an action that steals energy
Mhm.
is a completely mind-boggling concept when we were small. It just wasn't a thing.
No.
And yet it was completely a thing.
It is such a big thing. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good.
Well,
I like
again,
this kind
knowledge
of,
is power, right?
yeah. Yeah. it's interesting to see kind of looking around at people that and a few people went through my head that
Yeah,
kind of change depending on who they're with or what's going on. So
yeah.
yeah,
It's very common. These two are not unique. That they are not unique. And especially in my world, I see so many professional people come in and they start their session pretty professional, and as the energy opens up and starts to flow, they turn into their real, drop their veils of any identity. And
well,
that becomes really interesting. And it's wonderful to see the synergy by the time the actual session is over, because you're just a human. That's all you are.
and you think about when you're in that work power, I've got the power, that's very male oriented too,
Yeah.
right? So you're so out of balance between your male and female when
Yeah.
you're at work.
Yeah.
So
Which is
you're
a really good point, because usually when we're in those, especially narcissistic relationships too, we're powerful at work when we're that female, because I've got those accreditations and I've got those licenses or those whatever names and numbers after my name on the card. And then I get home and then I am the female unempowered, tromped upon. So my femaleness is just gone and my maleness is up and over the top, and the pendulum swung all the way over. So it's just completely right side off the charts. It's really unhealthy.
But see, that's what's so interesting because I think of myself and I was very, at when I was in the corporate, very male. Like when I first came to see you, but I was very strong in that male side throughout my whole life. Like everything I was doing
Yep.
versus changing that based on where if I'm at home or work or with some other people or whatever. I was just
Mhm.
that. Like, and it took a lot to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out.
Still, I have a tendency to go that way depending on what's happening in my 3D world. It's like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And that soft side of being commanding.
Hmm.
Like one of them was saying she got kind of like ramrodded into a situation with her car, and these mechanics were saying this, that, and the other thing, and she was kind of feeling bulldozered by them. And she said, yet if I was at work, that would never happen. And I'm like, see, that's just amazingly ridiculous,
Yeah.
because how do those two things change?
Well, I do believe though, if you are uncertain of or you don't know the information, like when you're in
Exactly.
your job, you know
Yep.
your stuff and you
Yep.
get out there, you can speak about it, you can talk to people about it. You're
That's what I'm
like,
saying. You're hiding behind the
yeah,
knowledge and the accreditation. Your power is hiding there, which is
yeah,
true and it's great. And
yeah.
if I am bumbling around talking about a car and I don't know anything, I still can speak up and say, I'm still not feeling comfortable, though. You need to explain this to me, because I am not going to do this, that, or the other thing until I'm in a comfort zone,
Mhm.
you know?
That
But
feeling of uncertainty and being vulnerable just totally triggers that flight or fight. Like,
yep.
yeah, that
That's
adrenaline.
why I said the limitations were guilt, vulnerability, and failure. That's what
Yeah.
we came up with, which are the homework.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
That's
a lot.
interesting cases that you've had a couple of them, especially recently.
And in the same week. That happens a lot with me. It's so funny, because when something comes in, oftentimes that other person within a 3-day period will be exactly the same.
Same.
Yeah. And that's not uncommon to just them. I think that's what's really cool.
No,
So
because now putting this out for other people to listen to, it's like, yeah,
I do that. Yep.
great.
I still do that. I mean, none of us are perfect. We all hide behind our identities. That's part of the game.
Yeah.
But
It's just
hopefully
catching
we're
yourself.
compacting those,
Right.
right?
Right. Um,
Cool.
recognizing it and doing something about it. That's what it takes.
All
So
righty. Anything else? That pretty good?
it was really good. That's a good
Good.
one. I like it.
That's
Yeah.
good.
I mean, it all kind of goes back to the same place of, your childhood
Yeah.
beliefs, your insecurities, what your fears are, your worth. It
A
it
lot of the
really.
anchors in everything we talk about will always be the same, but the
Mhm.
outcomes are so drastically different, and we don't understand these are still the outcomes of the anchors.
Right.
That's why
Right.
I think these are helpful, because people will go, holy crap, I actually do that. You mean that goes back too? And
It
it's like, yeah. So, yeah.
does. Layers and layers.
Oh, the old onion. All right. Well, on behalf of Kim and I, thanks so much for listening. We hope that you subscribe or hit the like button or share with someone. And if you choose to, we'd appreciate a comment or two so that we can give you what you like and need. So
Yeah.
until next time, everybody, cosmic hugs.
Goodbye.